Hey everybody, welcome to Raised in Co-Chiefs, the social media platform for the Weidenthal Family Farm. I'm Weedy, and today I'm going to be talking about dual-purpose chickens, the breeds that we got, and the ways we plan to use them. A dual-purpose chicken is a chicken that's good at producing both eggs and meat. In contrast, most of the chicken meat that you buy at the grocery store would be a Cornish cross hybrid broiler, or the eggs that you buy come from hybrid layers. Hybrid layers don't put on enough weight to actually produce good meat, and the broilers, they don't live long enough to get to the point that they lay eggs. Both of those are considered terminal crosses, and they're not intended for reproducing. In contrast, a dual-purpose chicken is typically a single breed that is reproducible and sustainable. They won't produce as many eggs as a hybrid layer, and they're not going to put on as much weight as quickly as a hybrid broiler. So today we received about 61 of the breast chickens from North Star Farms. We had actually ordered only 50, and Jen was pretty amazing and threw in quite a few extras for us. I spoke with her on the phone a few weeks ago when we were placing this order, and she was really helpful describing the type of target weight gain that we should see and the results that she's getting. In addition to those 61 breast chickens that we got today, we also got 30 of the Knoll New Hampshires. And those are quite a bit less expensive. If you're ordering 30 of them, I think you get them down to about $3 per chick. If you order 50 at a time, they're like $2.50 per chick. So let's go take a quick look at what we've got in the brooders over here. So here are the breasts and the New Hampshire chickens. The New Hampshires are the ones that are a little bit more orange in color, and the breast chickens are the yellow ones. Once they feather out, those will be white chickens. And the breasts are really pretty cool. Once they start to develop their combs and wattles, they'll have vibrant red combs and wattles, and their legs should be ideally a dark blue color. So they're actually the colors of the American flag, red, white, and blue. In the brooder box, they've got food and water. They've got a heat lamp. The heat lamp is secured to a hook very tightly. If you ever use these kind of heat lamps, you really should come up with a plan for securing them so that there's no possible way for them to fall and start a fire. The birds will huddle together under the lamp to get warm. In this brooder box, we've got somewhere around 20 of the New Hampshire chicks and 27 of the breast chicks. I find these New Hampshire chickens, or at least this specific lineage of New Hampshire chickens, to be pretty interesting. They were bred by an Amish man named Henry Knoll, and so they're known as the Knoll New Hampshires. A lot of the breeders that are breeding New Hampshire chickens, especially for show, will kind of poo-poo on these New Hampshire chickens. I guess they don't have the same color, they don't have the conformation that most breeders are looking for, but what Henry Knoll did was, over the course of 50 years, he selected specifically for body type, and he was selecting for very meaty chickens. So these New Hampshire chickens are known for getting up to a very large size by about 16 weeks. They don't produce as many eggs as a lot of other dual-purpose chickens. Online from Freedom Ranger Hatchery, they say to expect about 180 eggs per year. One person did tell me that they actually get closer to 250 eggs per year, but you do have to limit their feed. And these breast chickens are pretty awesome. So they got imported by Greenfire Farms around 10-12 years ago, I think. It's pretty well known that the birds that got imported from France were not necessarily of the highest genetic quality. And so there was a lot of breeding that's had to occur over the last several years to get the American breast chicken up to the standards that the high-quality French breast chicken is known for. So North Star Farms has done a pretty incredible job with their breeding program. One thing that they've been doing is they've been adding a breeder supplement sold by Fertrell. And that breeder supplement gives the breeding chickens, a lot of extra vitamins and amino acids, and those get passed on into the nutrients of the egg, And then the chickens actually hatch displaying a little bit more of their color. Normally, if you're not adding a supplement like that, you might wait months to actually see color development. And for a breeder that culls based off of color, they're having to raise those birds that whole amount of time. Because of the supplement that they're adding, they're actually able to see some of the off colors in their chicks, and they sell the day old cull birds that they culled based off. North Star has gotten good at being able to tell which ones are going to grow up to display their off colors. They sell them at a discount so that they're not getting wasted. Um, a lot of times with breeders, uh, don't really like to talk about it, but they'll breed a bird and they'll determine that it's not worth keeping and they'll terminate the bird right away. This way, these birds are not being wasted; they're being sold as color cull meat birds. So about 70 to 80% of the color culls are going to be males. That's typical. The birds that have more color in them are typically going to be males, and the ones that are whiter, those are going to be more females. So we expect about 70 to 80% of these to be male birds, and all of these color culls are not ones that we're going to keep for breeding. And one of the things that I did find interesting was even though we expect the New Hampshires to get up to higher weight and we expect their eggs to be a larger egg when they get to that age, what arrived in the mail today, we always weigh our birds upon arrival, and we had about a 34 gram average for the New Hampshire chicks, and we had about a 43 gram average for the Bresse chicks. Um, Hopefully, I can try to dive into why that might be the case a little bit more. I know that North Star Farms doesn't hatch eggs that are out of spec, so they weigh their eggs, and I believe Jen said that it was around like a 55 to 60 gram mark, um, that all of the hatching eggs are that weight. I don't know for a hatchery like Freedom Ranger Hatchery, even though they're a small hatchery, I don't know if they're weighing the eggs like that. It is possible that uh, these Bresse chickens get off to a faster start just because the bigger the egg, the more nutrients that are within the egg for the chick to come out strong. If you hatch small eggs, you typically get a weaker start. Breeders typically don't recommend hatching pullet eggs. Those are eggs from a young layer. Normally, when a chicken starts to lay, you get small to medium sized eggs, and what you want to hatch are large eggs, or medium to large size eggs. And you don't want to hatch ones that are too big either, because you can end up with some either you end up with some double yolk eggs or just eggs that fail throughout the hatching process. So you just kind of end up wasting those eggs that are too big. It is pretty cool seeing some of these breeding quality breasts in this brooder. Some of them are very white. I know it doesn't show up well on the camera. Um, they are a much paler color though than the chickens that are the color culls. One of the other things that we're going to try doing is we are going to be breeding purebred chickens from these. We're going to select breeders from them. Uh, but we're also going to try doing some crosses. An old broiler cross before the Cornish cross. It was a cross that was called Indian River, where you would take a New Hampshire chicken, I believe it was a hen, that you would cross to a Delaware rooster, and what you get what's called hybrid vigor. So uh, when you take two breeds and you breed them together, typically you end up with offspring that outperform the parents. And it'll be interesting to see if we can do something similar with maybe a Bresse rooster and a New Hampshire hen. Um, that'll be probably 9 to 10 months down the road before we get to the point that we're able to do that, because these will take about maybe 5 months to start laying eggs, and then we need to wait until they get up to that size, like we were talking about, to be a suitable hatching egg. One of the reasons that the New Hampshire chickens are popular in crosses is because they are a pretty feed efficient chicken. Some sources say that it takes about 3 pounds of food to put on 1 pound of weight gain. In comparison, a Cornish cross can be as little as like 1.6 pounds to put on 1 pound of weight. Um, but a typical heritage breed, uh, a lot of people say to expect 4.5 to 5.5 pounds of feed to put on 1 pound of weight. So if the New Hampshires really are in that 3-to-1 area, that's a pretty significant advantage for the New Hampshire chickens. I do know that these New Hampshires, typically from this particular Henry Knoll line, they do typically get so big, and they just want to keep eating, that you do have to limit their feed in order to get good production out of them, to get good egg production. Um, they shouldn't get to the point that they're like toppling over the way that a Cornish cross chicken would, but I have heard people describe them as being a lazier chicken if you feed them too much. So once they get to adult size, we'll start limiting their feed to about a third of a pound of food per day. And that should give them plenty to still be satisfied without getting obese, and should keep their egg productivity. One thing I always want to point out when talking about sharing results like this is not really highly scientific. I would hate for anybody to take the conclusions that we come to and run with them as absolute conclusions. What we're really providing here are just data points for other people to look at and observe, and hopefully just gain some information. But so often with, especially with the homesteading YouTube channels and stuff, people share their own experiences as absolute fact, and the way that we raise our chickens is going to be different from the way that another person might raise theirs. Especially like our feed, we're doing a soy-free diet, and we're sourcing a lot of our ingredients locally. Our triticale and our milo and our field peas are all grown organically here in Elfrida, and you know, the nutritional quality of our feed might be a little bit different of the nutritional quality of somebody else's feed. We're also adding some supplements. We add a little bit of lysine and methionine so that the chickens have plenty of amino acids to put on weight and to feather well. Um, we give them a Fertrell poultry NutriBalancer, which contains all the vitamins that they need for a healthy chicken. Um, that stuff's been pretty incredible working with it with our Cornish cross chickens. We were previously seeing anything from a 5 to 10% mortality rate, and especially on early season birds when we're getting them in February, it's real cold. They don't thrive. When we started adding the NutriBalancer from Fertrell, we're right about a 1.5 to 2% mortality rate, and we've even seen some batches where we've had 100% survivability. In these brooders here, we've got fresh wood chips down. We're going to be providing these chickens with whole milk every few days. That is just to help prevent coccidiosis. It's a common gut bacteria that can harm a chicken, even be fatal to a chicken. Um, it is a very common thing. Some people vaccinate for it. These birds aren't vaccinated. Um, so we need to be extra clean. They get it from their litter. Chickens will peck at everything. Um, we want to make sure, like these feeders that they've got right now, they're down low because they're little birds, but as they grow, we're going to raise them up so that their feed is elevated. We want the feed to always be at about the level of the average chicken's height of their back. Um, that way they're not having to bend down, they're not eating off the floor, they're not climbing in it and pooping in it and then eating their poop. That's all stuff that leads to coccidiosis and other illnesses. In our brooders, these are 32 square feet brooders. We make them out of plywood. Um, We typically aim for no more than 2 birds per square feet, and that's really pushing it if we go all the way up to two. It's more like 1.5 birds per square foot. So in these 32 square foot brooders, we typically have 40 to 50 chickens. For our ducks, we only do 30 ducks, and that's at the absolute most. Ducks need a lot more space. Um, but at 4 weeks, these chickens will move out, so they'll still be pretty small when they move out of here and go to their permanent outdoor housing. Hopefully, at 4 weeks, the differences between the males and the females is readily apparent, and we can separate the males. We can keep them in their own housing unit so that the birds that we're going to cull and eat are staying away from the hens and not doing any damage to the hens as they grow up and begin to get aggressive. Um, Breast chickens, they do need a little bit more space to move, even though they're not a huge chicken. They're a very active chicken. They like to forage, and if you keep them in too close a confinement, they will get aggressive with each other. I don't know about these New Hampshires. I've seen people post online that they had aggressive New Hampshires, and I've seen people say that these are super calm, lazy chickens. We'll just have to find out. Should be an interesting thing to compare the two going on. We've only talked a little bit about their feed. What these chickens have in front of them is um, about 21% protein. We like to get up to 22%, but I try not to add more than about 3.5% of their total diet as fish meal because I don't want the chicken meat to start tasting like fish. And with the other protein sources that we provide being field peas and canola meal, and being that we're corn free, so we have triticale and milo, they have a pretty high tannin diet, and so you can only give them so much tannin before uh, it's anti-nutritive, so they just won't be able to eat nearly as much of their feed if we try to bump their protein up with by adding more canola meal or adding more peas. We're already at the maximum amount that we can add. So we're at that 21%, and we add a little bit of lysine and methionine just to help make up for the deficiencies in their amino acid profile. Starting off, their feed is ground pretty fine. Um, we give them grit. Uh, Grit, they store it in their gizzards, and it basically acts like teeth for a chicken. Uh, they don't have teeth, so they have to grind up their food within their gizzard, and for that they need rocks. So that's what grit is. It's just little pieces of rocks that grind up their food for them. As they grow, we'll switch to a larger grind on their feed. Um, Chickens really like to have large particles more than they like to have small bits of floury substances. So by giving them the larger bits, it encourages them to eat a little bit more. And of course, for starting off, we want them eating as much as they can and really putting on fast weight. Once they get to the 16-week mark, that's when we'll start limiting the feed for the hens, and that's when the last of the meat birds should be processed. The final stage of life that we didn't talk much about is when these chickens get beyond that 16-week mark, at like the 20 to 24-week mark, the meat starts to get pretty tough. And that's when we start having what we call stewing birds. Uh, it does take longer to cook them. You cook them with moisture, and the meat will get soft. But a lot of people view the stewing birds as being like a cheap kind of throwaway bird. For us, that's actually probably my favorite stage of bird to have on the table. We like to make coq au vin or chicken and dumplings. Some pretty typical traditional preparations for them. Uh, when these birds get up to that 6 month mark and we do process them as stewing birds, they are so much more flavorful than what you would find from an 8 week old Cornish cross chicken. Uh, it's really remarkable just how flavorful they are. The broth is a stronger flavor too, and there's more connective tissue and more gelatin in their bones. So the broth that you make from them ends up being thicker and creamier and just having a really pleasant mouthfeel. Um, so for us, the stewing chickens are not actually a throwaway bird. That's probably like the most premium bird that we could possibly provide. So every few weeks we're going to be doing follow-up videos. We're going to be tracking the weights of the two different breeds, and eventually we'll get down the line to comparing their egg producing ability. One day we'll get to the point that we separate them and we're able to track their feed conversion ratio. That wasn't an option for today because we've got our brooders full. We've got 30 ducks in one of our brooders, 50 Cornish cross chickens in another, and then we've got 45 chickens from these dual-purpose chickens in each one of our other two brooders. So we're pretty filled up on capacity, and we had to do some mixing here. Hopefully you found this interesting. If you like what you see,
Like and subscribe.
like and subscribe.